Fred Gerlach for over 26 years. And we're gathered here this afternoon at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa to celebrate the life of Dr. Frederick Gerlach. Fred's wife, Anna, has asked me graciously if I would be willing to introduce some of the music and some of the other elements of the program this afternoon, and I'm very pleased to be able to be here to do that. Many of the family and our friends who are here today and or who may be tuning in online have requested an opportunity to speak about some of their experiences and relationships with Fred. And so, as you come up today, and in order to speak, please introduce yourself to the group here and your relationship with Fred in whatever way might be comfortable for you. The first piece of music that is going to take place today is a song, Shenandoah. Many of you have probably heard it before. Anna graciously put together a little overview of some of the music for me. So I'm going to read the information that she's provided so we'll all have an understanding of how this particular piece of music is important to her and was important to her and Fred. Shenandoah is a traditional American song. The lyrics tell the story of a canoeing voyager or fur trader who was in love with the daughter of a Native American chief. This earliest known version of the song likely originated with French-Canadian voyagers who traded with Native Americans around the Great Lakes starting in the 16th century. Since a young age, Fred had been involved with choral groups. Even in some of his Foreign Service posts, he belonged to some of the choirs that were available to him in those areas. When he came back from Germany in 1997, he wanted to be a part of a choral group. He went to a performance of the Milwaukee Choristers in a music hall that had especially good acoustics. And the choir surrounded the audience, giving it the feeling of the moving waters that are characterized in the song Shenandoah. Thanks to this song, Fred decided to join this choral group and being a part of the baritones. A year later, Anna and Fred met just in this choral group that she joined after arriving in Milwaukee in 1998. So I think we're going to be able to hear Shenandoah.
See
The following individuals have indicated a desire to share some of their experiences and memories with Fred. I'm going to list them in order, and then you can come up as you have an opportunity to speak. David Langhauk, John Crusius, Christine Balch, and there may be some substitutions. Some people weren't able to make it.
I am not David Langhaus. I'm Martha Crusius. I am one of Fred's nieces. But David Langhaus is unable to be with us today as his wife has had a stroke and is in the hospital in Sarasota. So this piece is a message that David sent when he learned of Fred's death. It's not exactly written as something for this celebration, but it conveys some of the connection that he had with Fred. Fred and I were best friends at Wauwatosa High School for 9th to 12th grades. After college, we met in Europe in 1960 and spent the summer at an international work camp in Jordan. In 1966, we both became Foreign Service officers, joined the same State Department orientation class, and spent 2 years living in Arlington, Virginia. Fast forward. My last contact with Fred and Anna was in 2001 when I stayed overnight with them in Milwaukee en route to a family reunion in the Wisconsin Dells. And this is from David Langhaus, addressed to Fred, my earliest, longest, and oldest friend.
I'm John Crusius, son of Fred's older sister Mary, or Mary Ellen. So Fred was my uncle. We never lived in the same place, and for most of our shared time together, we didn't even live in the same country. Yet, we come from a family that worked hard to stay connected despite the geographic distances between us. Family always meant a lot to Fred. Fred maintained a connection by always prioritizing coming home to the many family reunions we had every few years, sometimes in West Bend, Wisconsin, where his parents ended up late in life. I can recall one such event, a friendly dispute at such an event in a Lake Michigan location, over the best way to build a fire. And that dispute was between Fred, my Uncle Fred, my cousin Michael, and myself. The three of us had PhDs at that point. My Uncle Lloyd, Fred's older brother, walked by. He stayed out of that dispute, except to offer that this had to be the best educated fire building crew in the state of Michigan. So in more recent years, we've kept in touch by email, checking in about events in the country or the world, occasionally checking in about about a game between his beloved Green Bay Packers and their rivals in the locations where I lived, which at different times included New England and Seattle, home to two fierce Packer rivals. But Fred's dedication to family also took the form of researching and documenting our shared family history. That's a project he took on with my grandmother, his mother, Fred Gerlach. Some of that research was carried out when they traveled in search of records, but also to find and visit some family homes in Germany from a few hundred years ago. Fred passed that family tree information on to me to update and to share. As of today, there are just shy of 1,700 names of individuals in that family tree, going back hundreds of years. So that is a legacy of Fred's devotion to and interest in his family that his family members can be proud of and connected and educated by. I was just a kid during Fred's early years in the State Department, so I never got to visit the places he worked in, but I got a taste of it at Christmas time. We'd get gifts from wherever he was stationed, and I couldn't tell you if my gifts came from Zaire, or Morocco, or the United Arab Emirates, or Saudi Arabia, but I do recall getting a sheepskin, a big African drum, a huge metal sword. These were exotic gifts for a kid and a window into the very different world and culture that Fred was immersed in at the time. And when I had to do a report at school, these countries became natural topics for me. To help inform my sense of who Fred was and what his work meant, I looked at a U.S. State Department website and noted some employee guidance. It read, and I quote, Public service is a public trust, requiring employees to place loyalty to the Constitution, to the laws, and to ethical principles above private gain. So everyone here knew Fred, and we all knew that was an easy commitment for Fred to make. But I'm also sure that Fred would be passionate in insisting that those rules need to be continue to be followed in 2025 and long into the future. Thanks.
Is Christine Bosch here? Christine?
I have to go around.
I am not used to speaking in front of the microphone, so I hope you'll understand me. My name is Christine Bosch, and I know Fred in a totally different way. I've actually only known him for about a little over 6 years, and I brought 3 of my friends here with me who dearly, dearly loved working with him. I shared several years with Fred in a German conversation group at Ollie USF at the University of South Florida. Ollie is the OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute that has programs for older adults, inspiring them to engage in lifelong learning and keeping their minds sharp within a social environment. In the spring of 2018, I received a call from the director of Ollie that a gentleman was inquiring if there were any German-speaking lecturers on staff, as he was interested in participating in German conversation classes. Fred was given my contact information, as I was the only one teaching German language at Ollie. Fred called me and we met. First meeting. Looking up at him. Big man. He told me that he had recently moved to Tampa with his wife, Anna, and that he wanted to continue practicing German. He had organized a German conversation group at the University in Michigan, as he loved the language very much and he wanted to continue with that in Tampa. Fred persuaded me to help him organize such a group within Ollie, as I had a sizable contact list of former students of my German class. Fred told me that he had lived in Germany for many years, perfected his language skills that came in handy with his diplomatic travels in several foreign countries. And indeed, the German he spoke was flawless and sophisticated, far beyond colloquial German. After contacting all my previous students, offering the opportunity to improve their German language skills, we finally brought a group of 12 people together and got the green light to officially meet. Fred's job was to find a location for free where we could meet privately a couple of times per month. Fred's charming way took care of that too. He found an open-minded lady administrator at a public library who granted 6 free sessions in a private room. Fred had to persuade her to renew that commitment several times. He did it. Our gatherings were very lively, relaxed, and entertaining. We talked about our different upbringings, education, work experiences, sang songs, and laughed a lot. Whenever Fred spoke about his work, we were mesmerized by the way he expressed himself in German. He was an excellent storyteller. In March of 2020, everything suddenly stopped. COVID took hold. What to do now? We did make the transition to continue our German conversations online with Zoom, meetings as we could not meet in person anymore. We could stay at home and talk to each other on screen. We attracted several new participants with better knowledge of German, and the quality of our chats improved immensely. There were different topics of interest and lively discussions evolved. Fred was an entertaining and well-regarded host. Unfortunately, Fred's health became an issue. His energy and spirits diminished. He asked me to take over the lead of our German conversation group. He preferred to just listening in on our sessions and not actively participate anymore. Fred was an integral part of our lives for about 6 years, and we all miss him dearly. And thank you, Anna, for the privilege of letting me personally express my thanks and appreciation for what your husband meant to us. Fred will be fondly remembered. Thank you.
I'm Fred Gerlach Collins. I am Fred's niece, the youngest daughter of his older brother. I would say that I was Fred's favorite niece, but Fred had a way of making each one of us feel very special in his life. So the scripture reading that Anna picked out for me to share with you today is from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all of my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see and hear dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Uncle Fred, you will be very missed.
The next in the program are memories and sharings believe that Jay Courtwright is going to present that.
Anna asked me, Jay Courtwright, to read the words from Penny Hargarden. I came to know Fred through the Milwaukee Choristers, the long-standing 75-voice community chorus in Milwaukee. Fred joined in 1997 when he returned to Milwaukee after spending 40 years overseas. Anna, newly arrived from Cuba, joined 6 months later, and he said he noticed her right away. He later told me he was rediscovering his Milwaukee hometown and suggested they explore it together. The suggestion worked, and they were married not long after. The Choristers' 1999 tour of Italy functioned as a delayed honeymoon. For 19 busy years, Fred and Anna were dedicated choristers, using not only their voices, but their other talents to enhance the choir and build its reputation in the Milwaukee performing arts scene. Anna occasionally accompanied our performances on her flute and coached the choir in Spanish pronunciation when we sang in that language. She and Fred were able to visit relatives in Havana when the choristers visited Cuba in 2016. Fred held many positions in the choir, including president, but made his lasting mark in fundraising. Several trips and collaborations never would have happened without his relentless behind-the-scenes pushing. He subtly coerced me onto the fundraising committee and introduced me to the art of schmoozing donors, a term he probably wouldn't have used, but at which he excelled. His most enduring contribution was helping us to establish a separate foundation to manage a nest egg for the choir, which has given us a sense of financial security. The Milwaukee choristers tend to think of themselves as a family of very different people of all ages and backgrounds, bound together by a common love of music. Fred and Anna were an important part of that family. The choir felt their absence when they moved to Tampa in 2017, and they mourn the loss of Fred today. Written by Penny Hargarden.
Hello, I'm Fred's niece, Sandy Hack, and I've been asked to share some words from his dear cousin, Sherry Williamson Elzer, who couldn't be here today. Where do I start about Fred? I could write volumes, but I'm sure echo everyone else's sentiments that when you were with Fred, he made you feel like you mattered to him. He was a great listener and was always able to offer sage advice. I adored him, even though our visits were few and far between until the 1990s. We stayed in touch via letters and then emails. When Dave and I were married, Fred was in Morocco and sent a beautiful wall hanging to us. He, of course, couldn't attend our wedding, but we were both deeply touched by this, and it hung on our wall in our tea garden home for years. When Fred returned to the United States and settled in Milwaukee, I went to visit, and we had a great time, visiting the art museum, spending drinking beer, and going to Mater's, the famous German restaurant. I hope it's still there. Both of us had experienced losses. My husband had died in 1996, and Fred had parted ways with Suzanne, so we shared our grief. Fred had also become involved in our genealogy and invited me to go along to Germany to trace our ancestors' journey from Fladelsheim to Fairfield Township, Ohio. What a memorable trip that was. I was able to see our ancestral home, saw beautiful German countryside, and stayed with Suzanne near Frankfurt. Our travels took us also into Switzerland and France and completing our stay in Amsterdam. I wish I could go back and retrace that journey. On a trip to Barb and John's home in New Buffalo for a Gerlach gathering in 1998, Fred and I took a long bike trip, and he talked a great deal about this dark-haired beauty from Cuba who was in the choristers group in Milwaukee. So I was thrilled when he and Anna tied the knot. In the years since, it was always a pleasure to visit them in Milwaukee and Tampa. I miss him terribly. He was always positive and supportive and had a great sense of humor. I loved hearing him talk about his work in the Foreign Service and adventures overseas. I lived vicariously through him. My life was much richer having him in it. I loved and adored him. With love from cousin Sherry. And I would add, I had the joy, and I was so fortunate to spend 20 years when Fred had moved back from the Foreign Service to Milwaukee. I got to spend 20 years with Fred and Anna, having many Thanksgiving dinners and lots of Anna's flan and lots of fun times. And I'm gonna miss him terribly as well. And yes, Mater's is still in business, so if you come back, you can go to Mater's. Thank you.
And I'm Beryl Biles, as it says on the program. And the first time that I met Anna and Fred was when they came to the Ollie office to explore what it was and how it could serve them. I just happened to be there, and Ara asked me if I'd sit with them. We always do what Ara asks. So I sat with them to describe my understanding of Ollie and in what way I was enjoying it, and it provides some examples of how it could serve them. As I remember, Anna's eyes glistened whenever some type of music was a possibility. For Fred, it was almost anything having to do with the classics, especially whatever sounded German. From the earliest meetings of opportunity, now this is a fast forward, a few years later, when several of us got together, a group we call, actually Ara named it Opportunity, because we wanted to learn about opera, and we would do it together. And so we began meeting, and it's called the Significant Interest Group, for those of you who'd like to learn about it as well. The observations that Fred made for us, usually intellectually, to help us understand the depths and the meanings of the opera, always enriched us. Now, sometimes he did not need to be prodded for a response, and we'd get a reaction when our German pronunciation didn't quite meet the mark. He was known periodically to volunteer like that. But I always felt that he trusted our sincere curiosity and wanted to be sure that we were accurate in our interpretations. He was one of our own in-house experts, and we all treasured the learning together that Fred was a key of. How limited we would have been without Fred and others showing us the way to pronounce and to understand the languages, and the others who already had first-hand experience of opera that we did not. So the word accurate would definitely be one way, I'm sure all of you agree, to describe Fred. Another word, as you are probably aware, was also smitten, especially in terms of Anna. A psychologist once observed that indeed opposites attract, but values bond. And the description of oil and water actually fits the reality of Anna and Fred, and it made them a complete package for the rest of us. We miss you, Fred.
The next musical selection is entitled Corazon by Ignacio Sanchez de Fuentes. Performing on the flute is Anna Gerlach, and Patricia Black accompanies on the piano. Anna told me that this work was the first Cuban piece that she performed in the United States. And then after being a member of Milwaukee Choristers, the choir director, Dr. Kinchin, decided that she should play that piece in the spring concert of 1999. In a later spring concert, Anna played it and alternated with Fred, who was reading the translation of the lyrics. So I think at this point we'll be able to listen to Corazon. will be Michael Gerlach, Araceli Rogers, and I will be reading a letter from James Kinchin, who is the director of the Milwaukee Choristers. Michael?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm one of the many nieces and nephews here who wants to share the remarkable love that we all feel for Fred. There's so many things I could say about our Uncle Fred, but out of respect for everyone's time, I've tried to edit out at least some of the materials. But I hope to tell at least a few good stories here. The reality is that Fred's fascinating, diverse life could never really be captured in any reasonable time frame. So let me simply say that Fred was the quintessential cool uncle, and provide a few examples of that. Let me also point out that Fred would probably personally enjoy the fact that I snuck in the word quintessential, given that he studied German at UW-Madison and loved, throughout his life really, long words that left people scratching their head. This is me. Fred checked all the boxes for a cool uncle. Exotic James Bond-like lifestyle working in the Foreign Service? Check. I had no doubt growing up and visiting him at his overseas assignments that Fred was carrying out some sort of secret and dangerous missions that could make it into a Bond movie. But he, of course, never shared any of those secrets, which I guess is part of being James Bond. Willingness to fly and meet our family in our conservative community wearing a wild-looking Saudi Arabian headdress? Check mark again. And let me add that it was one of my sisters, I don't know which of the two of you, cried out when Fred arrived at the airport with this wild shamag headdress and said, "That's not my Uncle Fred." Which one of that? That was Did he have a truly great beard like every cool uncle should have? Absolutely. And in fact, one that I aspired to grow at some point. Fred had that beard for pretty much as long as I knew him, and it came in a variety of interesting forms, some of which I'd actually never seen before. And I imagine, Anna, you probably have whole stories about his beard and the variations that it went through. Provider of the most exotic Christmas gifts. John already mentioned that, and let me reinforce that point and just give you a couple of examples. There was an awesome African mask that completely freaked out my friends, but also managed to give me some street credibility among them as well. There was a wonderful thumb harp from Zambia that could make the most magical sounds that I'd never heard before. And I can honestly say, some of you know this, that I've been an African music fan for my entire life and probably can trace that back to Fred. And then finally, there was perhaps my favorite gift, which was an African designed chess set. The figurines looked like basically figures straight out of Africa. And of course, Fred would use that to pretty much consistently beat me in games of chess from that point on. And then finally, Fred had this wonderful uncle-like sense of mischievousness. And I could give you a lot of examples of that, but let me just mention one. When I was growing up, I would play world capitals with my dad at bedtime, rather than reading bedtime stories or doing what most normal people would do. My dad was pretty proud of my worldly knowledge, and so when Fred showed up in town, he asked Fred to test me on my world capitals knowledge. But of course, Fred was in the Foreign Service, which meant he knew every country in the world, he knew every foreign capital in the world, and with a twinkle in his eye, he looked at me and he said, "Okay, Michael, didn't ask me about Ireland or Ecuador or Mexico or someplace I might have heard of." He said, "What's the capital of the Chad Republic?" Anyone here know the Chad Republic? It's deep in the heart of the Sahara, and honestly, even today, nobody knows what the capital of the Chad Republic is. So I was just left like, and you got me on that one, Fred. And then finally, to complete the cool uncle checklist, Fred was wonderful, lifelong at providing personal support for me. He always showed an interest in what I was doing and wanted to learn my views of world news. He would share his own views. And I'm pleased to say that that correspondence continued pretty much all the way up until about maybe a year or so before his passing, when his physical limitations meant he couldn't communicate anymore. So when I say that Fred was the quintessential cool uncle, those are going to be my lasting memories of him. Love you, Fred. And I'll always remember what an awesome person and an awesome uncle you always were. Thank you.
I'm Ara Rogers. Fred and Anna Gerlach appeared on my office doorstep early in 2018. Having recently relocated to Tampa, they came to their local university looking for friendship and community. They found it with the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Florida, the program I led at the time. We eagerly took them in as instructors and volunteers in our program for older adults. Fred and Anna immersed themselves in our learning community and soon found themselves teaching, attending opera interest groups, attending our social events. They just dived in and we loved having them. Anna and I shared a Cuban heritage and a background in music, so we became fast friends. Fred's teaching for Ali USF focused on his work overseas in the Foreign Service, helping us understand the Saudis and the Islamic world. During an anniversary cruise the Institute organized in 2019, Fred and Anna came along and provided the educational content. Fred lectured and led discussions on Germany's transportation systems and American political gerrymandering, demonstrating the breadth of knowledge that his students appreciated about him. Fred also spearheaded our shared interest group for German language speakers, as Christine mentioned, and Fred and Anna together immersed themselves in our opera shared interest group. As time marched on and Fred's health began to fail, Anna would ask me to keep Fred company for an hour or two when she visited family in Cuba. I did this several years, several times, and it was always such a pleasure to sit and chat with Fred. We talked about our lives, world affairs, travel, music, and much, much more. He was unfailingly kind, gracious, and unassuming. You picked the perfect photo for him, Anna, on the cover, holding out that his face full of love and generosity. Fred, you'll be missed by so many whose lives you touched. Rest in peace and power, my friend.
As we all know now, Fred and Anna had a long and enjoyable career, if you will, with the Milwaukee Choristers. The choir director, James Kinshin, wrote Anna a letter stating that he was sorry that he couldn't be here today, but she's asked me to read his letter to you. He says, "Dear Anna, it is with deep sorrow that I learned of Fred Gerlach's passing. I regret that I cannot be there with you today, but very much appreciate the opportunity to share this message. Can it be that Fred and I and you go back over a quarter of a century? Time flies, but such is its passage, and such is the journey of life. The nexus was Cuba. I took my first trip there, leading a small entourage of Friendship Force singers, many of whom were members of Milwaukee Choristers back in 1998. What a charmed visit and rare opportunity to visit our neighbor to the south and to get to meet its people and experience its culture. It was a visit made all the more special because you helped to host us and tell us about the places that we saw in the Havana area. The insights that you shared and your kindness greatly enriched our experience. Well, long story shortened, this trip was auspicious, not just as an event, but because it connected us with Fred, and though we didn't know at the time, it would also connect us with you. Fred became one of our stalwart Milwaukee Choristers basses, and after a while brought his sharp, no-nonsense organizational sensibilities to service as treasurer and member of the Choristers board for quite a few years. And eventually you and Fred were united here in Wisconsin. The two of you had become, as we say, an item. I was so incredibly honored to be asked to provide music for your wedding. My family and I were gladly graced by the opportunities for us to visit each other's homes. If my black beans, when you came to Sturtevant, were not up to Cuban standards, you never complained. I was so happy when you became part of the Milwaukee Choristers family, gifting us from time to time with your sensuous flute artistry. Anna, Fred loves you dearly and deeply. I know that you loved him just as much. His love for you prompted him to open his arms as the two of you welcomed your dear mother, Lydia, whom I had met in Havana, into your home in Wisconsin. What an incredible love story the both of you were. We had mixed feelings about the two of you leaving to go to Tampa. We knew that we would miss you both very much, but we also understood that it was the right move for the both of you at that time in your lives. I ended my tribute with a recording of a song that I would love so much to share. With its gentle, poetic, and musical phrasings, it reminds us that even in the face of loss, the essence of those we love remains with us. Rather like Shelley's, music when soft voices die vibrates in the memory. This recording is by the Cambridge Singers under the direction of John Bruder, whose music you and Fred sang with us during your time with the Choristers. The piece is entitled "A Flower Remembered."
Yeah, but I'm not playing the music. That's not the music.
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess I'm supposed to read that.
That's okay, you read the music later.
A flower remembered. A flower remembered can never wither, forever blooming as bright as day. Its fragrance lingering like music softly playing, a gentle voice that's saying, I'll never fade away. I hear the echoes of many voices. Sometimes they're distant, sometimes so clear. Through all the sounds of life, they seem to whisper, will you remember? Will you fly homeward across my valley, toward the mountains all white with snow. The birds are gone now, the mountain snows have melted, but I still see their beauty, these scenes of long ago. The birds still fly in other valleys. The snows have turned to flowing streams. All things must pass, but memories are lasting. We will remember. We will remember. By John Root. So this next piece of music that Anna selected is from the opera Carmen, Intermezzo el Entrada. And Anna said that she thought that it might be a good idea to play another lovely piece of music. And she says that this piece of music speaks for itself. So now, an opportunity for a few others to share some memories of their relationship with Fred. Martha Crusius, Joseph McAfee, as read by Steve Crusius, and myself will share a few thoughts about my relationship with Fred. Martha?
So this time I get to represent myself. I'm Martha Crusius. I am the older daughter of Fred's oldest sister, Mary, Gerlach Crusius. Fred was 20 years older than me and had moved to Europe and then joined the Foreign Service during my early childhood. So I didn't see him a lot. In my early memory, Fred was always, to reference my cousin Michael and my brother John, he was the exotic international uncle, the cool uncle, the traveler. His letters and holiday cards told of places that I'd never heard of and described diplomatic work that sounded impossibly complex and sensitive. Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Zambia, United Arab Emirates, plus years here and there in Washington, D.C. or Germany. Christmas gifts, as mentioned before, brought these cultures to us. For me, it was Moroccan clothing, jewelry, African printed fabrics, tooled leather, carved wooden objects. My most extended and perhaps formative time with Fred was in 1974, when Fred had some home leave, and he wanted to introduce his first wife, Brigitte, to more of the United States. I was 15 or so, and was invited to join Fred, Brigitte, and my grandmother on a long road trip throughout the western U.S. I had not traveled much outside of the Midwest, so this was a big deal, visiting national parks and major western cities. We drove from Wisconsin to Colorado and Rocky Mountain National Park, down to the Grand Canyon, across to Los Angeles, up to Sequoia National Park, over to San Francisco, and then back to Wisconsin by way of Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks. I was awed by the snow-capped mountains, the wildflowers, the wild rivers, the red desert rocks, and the stunning blue of the Pacific. It was eye-opening and perspective-changing for me. None of us knew it at the time, especially not me, but 10 years later I would take a temporary job with the National Park Service, which has turned into a 40-year career with the National Park Service, supporting some of these great western parks from a base in San Francisco. Last April, my husband Tom and I visited Fred and Anna, realizing that Fred might not have much more time on this earth. We had a lovely visit for several days and had the opportunity to ask Fred questions about his early years, when I was too young to understand his work and his international experiences. Then we left for a couple days exploration of Everglades National Park, because that's what we do. When we came back for a last day's visit, Fred told me that he'd always thought that the Western National Park trip that he organized for us was, at least in part, responsible for my career in the National Park Service. And he was right. Who knows what turns our lives would take if things were different? But when I had the opportunity to work for the NPS, I grabbed it. It means a lot to me that one of my final conversations with Fred was reflecting back on that time with him 50 years earlier. Fred influenced many people, built international relationships, inspired his family members, and made sure that we knew that he cared about his nieces and nephews. I'm grateful to have had a lifetime of connections to my exotic, international Uncle Fred.
Hi, I'm Steve Crusius. My cousins will not mind reminding me and everybody else that I'm the oldest of the cousins. Fred said he finally forgave me for making him an uncle when he was all 16 years old. I'm going to read the memory that was written by Joseph McCullough about Fred. Joseph McCullough is the manager of educational programming at Osher Lifelong Institute at the University of South Florida. These are his words. I was privileged to get to know Fred Gerlach in my position at OLLI USF as the educational programming manager. Fred made profound contributions to the Osher Institute, first as an esteemed instructor and then to me as a friend. Not surprisingly, the classes Fred taught for OLLI centered around his research and work in Saudi Arabia. I remember his first class, which was the Middle East, Islam, oil, and politics, because those topics were of interest to many of the OLLI members. The students were so grateful, and it was reflected in their glowing evaluations. One even wrote, "I thank God for Fred Gerlach. He helped me to understand the Middle Eastern perspective, which we in America seemed to know so little about, and what we do know seems incorrect." Fred was a scholar, and an accomplished lecturer. His knowledge of the Middle East was vast, and he delighted to share his wisdom and life experiences. I was blessed to host Fred on several occasions while we discussed future classes. He was so interesting and a delight to converse with. Frequently, his lovely wife, Anna, would accompany him, and I would enjoy the loving banter between this beautiful couple who ostensibly, there's another word, ostensibly seemed so different, yet were so in love. I love the story of how the two of them found each other very romantic. Fred was always the gentleman, chronically kind, and incessantly, there's that word again, another word, it's incessantly witty. He made his mark upon OLLI members and on me. God bless you, Fred. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've known Fred for about 26 years, and I was first introduced to Fred by Kari Collins, his niece, who's here today. When she and I spoke earlier, she had forgotten that she had been the connection between Fred and I, but she was, and thank you, Kari. It's been a marvelous relationship. You know, as I've thought about the different things that we were able to do together, certainly my wife Karen, who passed away about 4.5 years ago, Karen and I were able to spend many enjoyable dinners at Anna and Fred's home in Milwaukee. And of course she would treat us with delicious food that she knows how to cook, Cuban cuisine. And we were able to invite them to our home from time to time as well. And there were other events that we would share together. I remember a fundraiser that we went to at one particular point. But probably my most moving memory of Fred happened just last March. Anna was on a trip to Cuba to visit family and friends, and I was visiting with Fred, just share a couple of days with him while Anna was away. And Fred was having difficulty, obviously, getting around, but at one point I asked him if he'd like to try to get out because it was a beautiful March day. And he said, yeah, he said, let's try it. So we went down to Rick's on the river. And we'd been there once before, but I remembered it, and I said, let's go to Rick's. He said, okay, yeah. So we went down to Rick's, and we were able to, we were shown to a table outside. Fred had, I think it was chicken fingers and French fries. And I had either the same or a hamburger, I'm not sure. But I've got a couple of pictures on my phone, and I wish I could have had them available so I can show you today. It was really enjoyable just being able to share some food together, enjoy the beautiful March weather, talk a little bit about just how things were, but for the most part we just sat and kind of enjoyed each other's company. And it was really a very moving experience. I just enjoyed the opportunity to spend that time with Fred. And it was the last time I saw him. I haven't seen him since then. So Fred has been a very significant friend in my life, and I miss him very much, as I know the rest of you do as well. I don't know if there's anyone else who'd like to say something, share any of their thoughts. Anna?
We were married for, when he passed, we were shy approximately 3 months from 27 years. So it was a long time, I would say. And really we had, ups and downs as everybody else, but really were more ups than anything else. And we enjoy a lot of things that we had in common. And especially, what I remember the most is like, it looked like my mother and him were brother and sister. Because they were these type of people that were very strong, let's say, very honest. He said, I would have never been a good politician, I'm too honest. So, you know, those were his phrases, I'm not even joking. So, you know, so what I could say is one thing that he said that was on the joking side, he said, you know, my brother had traveled all the world, but the only place that he hasn't been in is in Cuba, and I have been there several times. So he had that joke with about Lloyd and Marianne. And then so I didn't bring my glasses, so I hope I can read the notes that I made. Well, Fred was, to me, he was a citizen of the world. Something that I really, really learned with him. I had limitations about knowledge of news and things that were happening in the world when I was in Cuba. So I learned French in order to hear, you know, the French radio and find out what was going on around the world. So more or less the people that were intellectually, that wanted to find things out, we did that. So when I came to the States, I was a little bit rusty in my English. So when we were talking and I was kind of in trouble, then I talked to him in French and then he responded, and that's how we got along at the very beginning. So it was a little bit difficult then after we married and all that. Oh, one thing, we were very good friends from the very beginning. That's one thing that was important to me, and it was very important to him. So we just, for me, it was very difficult, the normal daily phrases in English. That was something that I had to master, you know, and in the daily, let's say, life. But I think I did well, and I got across with what I wanted, and he understood, and I suppose it was difficult for him too, but anyway. What else? He wasn't really a religious person, but you wouldn't believe that God was really, really ingrained. Because, for example, when we got married, 3.5 days later, his mom passed away. And then that was that cold, we were finishing breakfast, and the landline at that time, that was the only thing that was available, a landline. So he went to the bedroom, and when he came back, he was sobbing. So it was, and he said, you know, it looks like it was, our wedding was a God inspiration, because if I would have waited until December that I wanted, she would not have been there. So that was another thing that he said about God. And then he claimed to God 2 days before he passed. So anyway, I don't want to go there because then I'm going to break. So anyway, what else? And then one thing that I want to tell you is that there was an absolute confidence when we talked about medical situations. I told him what I thought, and he told me what he thought, and we got a compromise on things, you know. And so he really, really trusted me when I said something about his health that I didn't agree or whatever. So in any case, he was aware that I was there when he passed. And the good news is that he passed in an institution that was phenomenal. And he was at peace and without pain. So I'm happy that I was there. Since he went there, I didn't move, I didn't go home until he passed. So I'm terribly, very, very happy about it. And if everything in my life could repeat, I would do exactly the same. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of you that had helped so much with everything. And there are people that are not listed there, so you forgive me for that, but you have been phenomenal, and thanks for coming.
The closing music selection is The Lord bless you and keep you, as performed by the Milwaukee Choristers. And Anna points out that Fred was in this particular recording, and so he's singing to us as well. So that concludes the ceremony today. There's a small reception outside. As you exit the church, off to the left, there's a beige building. It's